Hello, everyone. I hope you are enjoying the conference so far. My name is Daria Goztyla. I'm with the Washington DNR Urban and Community Forestry Program. I'm the Urban Forest Project Specialist, and I'm so excited to talk to you today about urban forest pest readiness, how we define urban forests, the threats they face from invasive pests, and I'll run you through an example of how a municipality can conduct a pest risk assessment to help guide pest readiness and management objectives in case of a new pest outbreak. I know many of us are already well aware of the concept of an urban forest, but let's visualize it together. In urban areas, there's trees lining streets and boulevards. There's trees in maintained parts of parks or school grounds that we admire while we're walking our dogs or taking a jog. We might also be visualizing the trees in our own backyards that we maintain, take care of, and maybe even planted, as well as the ones that we regularly check to see if the fruit are ripe. I know that I have some foraging spots around town and in every city that I have lived in. In general, it's undeniable that even in urban areas that are human-dominated with gray infrastructure and a built environment, we still live amongst an urban forest. Trees dot our parking lots, our neighborhoods, highways, and streets, and from an aerial photography, we can see how extensive they are throughout our built environments. These urban trees provide us with numerous benefits, such as cooling effects, reducing pollution in our built environments, mitigating stormwater, providing habitat for our urban fauna, and they are also very pleasant to be around, very pleasant to look at. Maintaining our urban forest health and these positive benefits that the trees provides will continue to be challenged by climatic stressors such as rising temperatures, drought, and shifting precipitation patterns, which are expected to increase tree stress and therefore pest vulnerabilities in the Pacific Northwest in coming years. And it's important to take into account that urban forests lie at a unique interface of trade, the movement of people, and neighboring forest and agricultural resources. I've included the traffic geoportal map here, which shows how much movement is occurring between and within our urban centers in Washington. Now imagine if I also layered a map of train routes, ship routes on top of this vehicle traffic map. It would really show that humans are busy, mobile species. In this movement, we move goods and we move vehicles, and all of that poses a risk of introducing new non-native urban forest pests that have the potential to negatively impact our resources, economies, and ways of life. Because of all of this, cities are hotspots of invasions, and many urban areas around the world share common invasive species because of this. Urban ecosystems are not only key points of entry for many non-native species, but it is also well documented that they are the focus of secondary release or escape into surrounding natural landscapes. Invasive pest outbreaks in urban areas can quickly and negatively affect ecosystem services of urban trees upon which residents depend on, and without intervention, a pest found in an urban area can quickly spread to forests outside of the urban area and throughout the region. Knowing the unique relationship between urban forests and pests led the Washington Invasive Species Council, the Washington DNR, and many other partners to develop the Urban Forest Pest Readiness Playbook. Any organization, town, city, county, tribe, university, or any organization working with urban forestry is encouraged to become familiar with this playbook. There is a role for everyone, from land managers to volunteers, to play in the playbook that's outlined in the document. This playbook was created to close readiness gaps by identifying management areas that require improvement and recommending actions to improve pest readiness in our communities. Users can prioritize actions based on gaps identified through an initial self-assessment quiz. The self-assessment of the playbook asks 20 questions that help answer the question, is your community forest pest ready? There are a total of 4 sections that the community is quizzed on. They're outlined there: the understanding risk, capacity to support a response, ability to expedite informed decision-making, and community support to expand your impact. The self-assessment gives your community or organization an urban forest pest readiness score and a list of 20 actions to prioritize to increase resilience. Today, I really want to shed some light on the first section, understanding risk. Arguably, understanding risk is the most important aspect of pest management to consider because it shifts our frame of mind from reactive management to proactive management. So often we don't realize the value of a resource until it's gone or being attacked. If we're not aware of what we have and the benefits that it provides us, we aren't going to be invested in its protection and we won't be aware of its vulnerabilities. Understanding risk is heavily oriented around action items 6 and 7, which are on page 50 and 52 of the playbook, and they're related to tree inventory and canopy maps, as well as performing a risk assessment, which I will be walking you through today. So let's set the stage. We're going to be looking at Tacoma and utilizing their sample public tree inventory, and I'll walk you through how a community can perform a pest risk assessment utilizing the inventory data. We'll be running the risk assessment on one particular pest today, the emerald ash borer. Emerald ash borer, as we're well aware, I'm sure other presenters have covered it throughout the conference, is an invasive wood-boring insect from Asia. It was first detected in the Detroit area in 2002. I'm originally from Michigan, so I have a lot of experience managing this pest, lots of insight into its devastation, into the extent of damage and management that it takes to manage this pest, and it will truly kill all healthy ash. Sometimes up to 99% of ash will be completely infested and wiped out if treatments or other management aren't implemented. So signs of infestation: galleries under cracked bark, D-shaped exit holes, declining canopies, suckering at the trunk. Washington's native ash, the Oregon ash, is susceptible, as well as commonly planted white ash and green ash and all the cultivars of true ash, which are in the genus Fraxinus. And transportation by humans is likely the fastest way of EAB infecting new areas. Emerald ash borer is not here yet, but it is a species we know a lot about from eastern states and can readily prepare for. I wanted to quickly show you the extent of emerald ash borer currently throughout the United States. This map is from September 1st, 2020. The newer infected states are Colorado, South Dakota, Nebraska, and Minnesota. And with EAB, the trend across the nation is that it's not a matter of if it will infect an area, but when it will infect an area. So what's at risk? Our true ash species are at risk. Emerald ash borer is genus specific, so this makes management a lot easier because you just have to know how to identify our true ash species to begin to make a management plan for it. When a pest has numerous host species, this becomes a lot more complex. But in some sites, EAB has killed over 99% of ash within a decade of its arrival, as reported by Klooster in 2013, referring to studies conducted in Michigan and Ohio that included urban areas. I wanted to briefly show an example of one ash and its environmental benefits, its ecosystem benefits. So this is from the Tacoma tree plotter inventory that we'll be using today. This ash right in downtown, its diameter at breast height is 22 inches. So that's a well-established tree with a large canopy. Its overall monetary benefit annually is $129, and that's broken down to stormwater management, energy conservation, as well as carbon sequestration and avoidance. So some of those statistics can definitely come into play when we are trying to describe the benefits that the trees are currently providing and what is at stake if a pest were to infest the area. We're definitely going to want to talk about the benefits that the current trees provide. I also wanted to show you a visual of a neighborhood that was 100% ash, street trees, and the before EAB infestation on the left versus the after. In this instance, the management plan was full removal with partial replacements. This is a city in Ohio. But there are numerous other management outcomes that can be adopted that we'll go over today. It's very devastating when there is a lot of ash trees in a community. So we're going to start by looking into Tacoma's tree inventory because we want to analyze what we have. I was actually tallying up how many tree inventories the DNR Urban and Community Forestry Program has funded over the years yesterday, and it was well into the 40s. So we can keep in mind that we can replicate what we do here today in many other communities. When conducting inventories, we have many options. We could do a tree by tree or a complete inventory, a sample inventory of just ash trees. And you don't have to get super fancy these days. There are many collector applications that you can download on your phone these days that can help many smaller size communities or campuses or even neighborhood associations gather their own tree data to get started on risk analysis. But if your community doesn't have a tree inventory, make sure you reach out to the DNR Urban and Community Forestry Program, and we can help you get started by connecting you with some resources. So an inventory will tell you how many trees you have. For EAB, we're going to query this by the genus Fraxinus. Where the trees are located, it will tell you the size of the trees, and it'll help you identify ash candidates to preserve utilizing treatments. It will also help to direct your management activities, and utilizing the information coupled with management activities, you'll be able to draft out an estimated budget for emerald ash for management activities. The city of Tacoma has a publicly accessible tree inventory. Kudos on their transparency. I put the link on the top left there if anyone wants to check it out on their own. It's a fun tool to play around with. You can learn a lot about your surroundings, and it's really great to look for tree inventories, especially publicly accessible ones. If you're working on tree identification skills, it's a really valuable resource to check. I should mention first that this is not a complete inventory, but for today, we're going to pretend that it is. It shows only public trees in right-of-ways and parks. I think cemeteries are excluded in this inventory, though some cities do also have tree inventory data in cemeteries. The total amount of trees inventoried in Tacoma is 19,085 trees. And I ran a filter on all the true ash, the Fraxinus species, and the result was 702 trees. So what do we know so far? We know that about 3.7% of all of Tacoma's inventory trees are ash, but that doesn't necessarily tell us the full story because ash are a large canopy species. For example, green ash have an average spread of about 25 feet at maturity. So canopy could also be calculated separately, which some cities with canopy cover goals may want to track. But what I'm saying is that at 3.7% of the total population, the total canopy of the public trees might actually be around 6% or 7%. I wouldn't be surprised if that were the case. These initial numbers don't really tell us the full story. What we're seeing is that there are a couple ash hotspots throughout Tacoma. This is actually really common and seen a lot in eastern states that already went through EAB outbreaks. It's often the result of monoculture plantings or plantings that were contracted out neighborhood by neighborhood that had minimal diversity standards in place in past years. As we see, management of EAB would be concentrated in about 6 to 7 areas that house the majority of the ash in Tacoma. So not every resident or neighborhood is going to see the devastation or impact of EAB the same. For some, the whole street character could change due to removals. The whole look and feel of their surrounding neighborhood might be impacted, while other neighborhoods, one tree might be taken down and replanted, and no one will ever even know it was infected. As managers or even as volunteers helping with replanting efforts following an invasive pest, we have to be aware of that. Not everyone experiences a pest outbreak the same. Some residents feel the effects much deeper. I wanted to point out 2 areas that I thought were really interesting. In the Northeast Block, there's a residential community, a residential neighborhood where about 40% of their street trees are ash. So this neighborhood would see a lot of action with EAB management, and we would have to be very mindful of how we communicated with that community. I also thought that this highway buffer strip was interesting. The ash here are providing extensive noise, visual and physical barriers of the highway to this industrial block. Without those ash, the area might become noisier, it might be less safe. So we definitely want to consider some of those buffer areas as well, and making sure that we are replanting purposefully and ensuring that maybe we don't remove 50% of the ash or 100% of the ash at one point, but we allow a slow transition of establishment. This all has management implications. So now I'm looking at the trees by their diameter at breast height, so by their size. Roughly 40% of the ash in Tacoma are in the 0 to 6 inch category, which is small enough to remove with limited equipment and resources. That's great because it will reduce removal costs, and many removals at this size can be done in-house or even with volunteers in some instances. But we also have a percentage of ash that could be potential treatment candidates. I've identified 19.5 or 137 ash in the 12 to 30 inch range that could be contenders for treatment. Treatment is appropriate for healthy, high-value ash trees, and treatment should begin once the community is in or near an infested area. There are numerous amounts of insecticides on the market for EAB treatment. I'm most familiar with triage, but there's numerous imidacloprid options as well. Application via systematic trunk injection by a certified pesticide applicator is generally the go-to approach with ash treatments, and treatment is a long-term commitment, likely over the life of the tree. It needs to be applied every 2 to 3 years. 3-year efficacy is becoming more and more likely, what we're learning from eastern states. But that's why most times it doesn't make sense to treat trees that are too young, because they could be removed and replanted with a different genus, and that would result in saving costs over the life of a tree. I should mention that I'm not considering condition here. Out in eastern states, many tree scoring matrix for ash treatments have become developed, which became very useful when there are many, many ash trees. I'm talking in the thousands, and funding is limited, so you have to be strict on which ones to keep. What all this inventory data is leading up to is a question of where will your community likely fall on the EAB management spectrum. There are a couple of main management options. First, removal, sometimes full removal of ash trees. Sometimes it's on a rotation or a schedule, so too many trees aren't taken out at once. As you can see in the picture on the left there, this was a street where every other ash tree was taken out and replaced, and then 5 years later, the remaining ash were taken out and replaced. That allowed some age diversity to occur, as well as some species diversity, because one of the plantings was conducted in the spring while the other was conducted in the fall, and some of the stock was different. The second option is treatment. Like we discussed, it's limited by size constraints and by cost, since it is a lifetime incurred cost of treatments and a lifetime commitment. And last, some management is no management or reactive management of taking down trees as they die. This tree was actually one that was missed in our tree inventory in Grand Rapids, Michigan. So when I saw it, I had to get out of my truck, inspect it, inventory it, and then add it to a removal contract. Usually cities fall in one of three overall management areas: preemptive management, selective management, or delayed management. With the use of the Urban Forest Readiness Playbook, we want our cities to be in the preemptive to selective stages. As for Tacoma, removal may be a good option because almost 40% of the ash are under 6 inches in diameter, so they're easy to remove. We also learned that about 20% are good candidates for treatment, and that leaves another 40% to be removed over the course of a few years or rolled into one single removal contract and strategically replanted using high biodiversity standards. For budget and scenario estimates, if your community does have a tree inventory, it's recommended to use the Purdue EAB cost calculator. It will show you cost per year. It will show you the different cost breakdown based on different management criteria that you select. So that's the best resource that we have to date, and it's regularly updated as well. But other considerations for budget estimates, make sure that residents are involved in determining goals for your community's ash tree and urban forests. Residents do change management priorities and outcomes. Their input is highly valued by commissioners, by foresters, and holding public sessions to review management plans is key to a cohesive response. Identify historical or culturally important trees that may be added to the list of candidates for treatment. And I'm providing you with some rough estimates from Michigan. This is back in 2018 on our average cost of removal, stump grinding, replacement plantings, and insecticide treatment for ash management. So try the EAB cost calculator and recognize that there are multiple variables in determining cost. I want to also reiterate the use of the Urban Forest Pest Readiness Playbook, and to take that self-assessment as the first step to becoming more urban forest pest ready. There's the website. And I'd like to quickly thank all of our partners involved in the development of this project. There's too many to name, but it really does take all the partners coming together to create a successful response to pest outbreaks statewide. And thank you for participating today. I hope you got some good ideas from it. I also wanted to include Justin Bush's and Alexis's contact information here because they are so involved in the Pest Readiness Project, but I'm leaving my contact information there as well. Thanks so much. Take care.